Well, the camp is set up. We've got the fire started. Picnic table is laid out. And we've even got our bed ready in the tent. So we're going to sleep tight tonight out here and listen to the sounds of the woods, the speedboats running up and down the river down there. But we are all good to go. We're going to have weenies over the fire tonight once the fire gets going. Thing about these fire rings at these state parks, they don't allow any air to get down into the fire, so they're real hard to get started. We made it through the night. I'll have to say this isn't the best state park I've ever been in. It's extremely noisy.
Yep.
There's a concrete plant 300 yards up the road here that got started about 6 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
Just as it was starting to get dark last night, we were sitting by our fire and kind of enjoying a peaceful evening. All these bright pole lights came on all over the campsite.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And inside our tent, it was bright enough you could read.
Yep.
And this is at night. So, all that being said, it was a pretty good night. It did quiet down quite a bit. We got some rest, got up this morning and had our breakfast. Had our breakfast, bacon and eggs, without the eggs.
Eggs
But
got
another
broken.
small tragedy. We picked up our cooler to move it last night, and our cooler's pretty old anyway. We said this would be the last trip for it.
Yep.
When I went to pick it up, the handles broke. And even though the eggs were inside a container in the cooler, when the cooler hit the ground, all the eggs broke. So we had bacon sandwiches for breakfast this morning.
Yep.
We're all cleaned up. Breakfast is done, and we're getting ready to
Head out.
close up and head out towards the fort. We're going to go down by the boat ramp first, check it out, see if there's any good fishing spots for later.
We had a visitor during the morning this morning. We had a little buddy come up and spend the morning with us and eat breakfast with us. A little kitty cat. Not sure if it's a male or female, but most calicos are female, but she came out and was just purring and trilling and just became really quick buddies. We gave her a hot dog we had left over and a couple of pieces of bacon and a bun. Boy, she just really made friends with us right off the bat, and so she'd been hanging around.
This is the original site of Fort Boonesborough. Daniel Boone first came to this part of the Kentucky in 1769 on a hunting and trapping trip. He had heard stories of all the lush green valleys and fertile land that was west of the Appalachians. Well, he liked what he saw, and he came back in 1775 with Colonel Richard Harrison and 30 other people. And they established Fort Boonesborough as a hunting, trapping, and trading site. Now, 1775 marked the beginning of the Revolutionary War, and in addition to that, there were also hostile Indians in the area. So when they built the fort, they built a log palisade, and we'll see a reconstruction of that here in just a little bit as we go down the road. In 1779, Fort Boonesborough was attacked by Indians and British troops. They laid siege to the fort for 13 days, but the fort never fell. This was also the area of one of the first general assemblies in Kentucky. They had originally planned, the first settlers, on establishing the colony of Transylvania in this area. And today we still have Transylvania College just south of here in Richmond. And that's a throwback to those days. If you can read this sign here, it tells the story of the elm tree where they held the first assembly. This monument is to the Transylvania Company and to the original settlers who were founding the colony of Transylvania. And it denotes the first Christian services held west of the Appalachians. I don't know if you can read this or not. In pious and eternal commemoration of the first Christian service in Kentucky, attended by the pioneer founders of Transylvania and conducted by the Reverend John Lythe of the Church of England on this hallowed spot, May 28, 1775. Well, up here is the new reconstructed Fort Boonesborough Fort. Now it opens at 9 o'clock in the morning. We got here at 10 o'clock and there were absolutely no parking places. We drove around until somebody was leaving and was able to get there. So if you're coming, I would highly suggest that you come early. Pretty neat looking, but I imagine the original looked a lot different than this one. This does a really good job of showing you the relationship to the state park and all the different sights to see. We are up here. This is the new fort, where I showed you the side of the old fort before. It's down here by the Kentucky River. Mary and I are staying at the campgrounds this weekend, which is up here. And actually, from our campsite, we are on the banks, on the bluffs overlooking the Kentucky River. Seems that we got here during the Descendants gathering. So there's quite a few people here today. Like I mentioned, there were no parking places at the parking lot. We were just fortunate to find one from a couple that left. But as you can see, the inside of the fort is reconstructed and they have different cabins and divisions and demonstrations of what went on during the pioneer life here. So we'll walk around and see what all they got. All these different cabins around the fort have different exhibits in them. Sewing, spinning, weaving, woodworking, candle making, cooking, officers' barracks, enlisted barracks. Just a real nice living history exhibit. There's even a tavern down there. The enlisted barracks, where single enlisted members of the militia would sleep. This was their quarters. Of course, they had very Spartan living conditions.
Pretty much all it. And it's also an indication that the things aren't doing well. If you've been out in the woods and you're with a group of people and you don't smell smoke and you should, something's wrong. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was a lot of other things. besides just the fire. But it was something that, yeah. And a lot of times it was the kids' job to make sure the fire stayed going.
Ah, that's why you get a new job. Act like you're shy, girl, or something. The Indian something representative.
The woodworking shop.
Basically, all I need to do is I'll just go in, hammer it out just a little bit more, and add a little bit more of a taper to it. And then I'll go ahead and be able to start on making a little curl finial, which is just kind of a fancy name for a little curly cube on the end of it. And then we'll make our first bend, and then I'll put another curly cube in there, and then make the opposing bend that'll actually make it look like the letter S. And be very close to completing, if not fully completing, my campfire cooking sets. I think after these two get made, I think I only have to make one more before I actually feel like I'm doing right by people and giving them enough hooks for each set. I could get by with maybe one less on each set, but the set wouldn't be near as functional. You know, I'd feel a little bad. How'd it do? Somewhat round, and I'll switch over and do that. And then we'll actually, like I said, I'll try to reward some of y'all's patience a little bit and actually start the thing. The truth is, over a majority of blacksmith's labor can just be in hammering out the dimensional rods that they need. You know, because you couldn't just factory order custom sizes. You're typically getting it in big bars, and they'd have to be worked down. Even if something was needed to be a horseshoe, you didn't have something small to start with, you might have to do a lot of hammering from something big just to get down to something like a horseshoe or a nail or something like that.
Tonight, we have steaks on the fire for supper. Got the fire going, got a good bed of coals. The potatoes are already on. Have to have baked potato with our steaks. But we'll let them cook for a while, make sure they're good and done. And then we'll slap us a couple of ribeyes right there on that fire. And that'll be yum, yum. And here we are, ready to throw the steaks on. We'll put Mary's on first. She likes hers medium well.
Mm-hmm.
We'll let it cook for a while, and then we'll put mine on. I prefer mine more on the rare side. Alrighty. Mary's steak is done on one side. Mine cooks about half as long as hers does, so we'll throw mine on now. Give it a few minutes. Flip it over, and then we'll be ready.
are some nice looking ribeyes.